Today we're going to talk about what is the demonic language really. The only problem with this is nobody really knows, so we can theorize where it has stemmed from, at least. Most people who are into demonolatry, you'd ask about demonic ends and they would immediately refer you to S. Connolly, which, you know, makes a lot of sense considering the ends are mentioned a lot in Connolly's books. But there have been rumours and theories that the ends have been written in family grimoires long before Connolly got a hold of them. I don't have any of the old grimoires, so I can't confirm this, but I mean, take it with a pinch of salt. They could be like 16th century or older, or they could be something that someone's come up with along the way. Either way, they work. That's all that really matters. Some people are probably wondering where on earth the ends stemmed from, because surely if they were invented, instead of channeled from the demonic themselves, and even if they were channeled from the demonic themselves, surely the language stems from somewhere. Surely the language stems from some other language. Most people will probably start off thinking the ends came from where I thought they came from originally, which is they stemmed off of Latin. Which isn't really that surprising. I mean, Latin sounds a bit similar to some of the words you might have heard in some demonic ends, for example, so I can understand where people come from for that. But upon looking up some of the words in demonic ends, there was no matches, really, for Latin. Some words, however, not all of them, but some words did show up in Latin, such as F and ire, which is interesting. Some people back in the day theorised that maybe it stemmed off of other ancient languages, such as Gaelic and things like that, because there are some fancily pronounced words in there. Probably could have stemmed from there originally. It is written that some people did theorise it was some kind of ancient Gaelic, but turns out that has been debunked as well. But I can sort of understand where they come from. Like Rom, for example, Furcan Ali Laris Rom. That could sound a bit like Gaelic to somebody, I could probably assume. But yeah, that has long since been debunked anyway, so. But yeah, believe it or not, it technically does not count as speaking in tongues. I don't even, what does speaking in tongues even mean? What counts as speaking in tongues? Would speaking French to somebody who doesn't understand French count as speaking in tongues? Does it have to be some ancient language, such as, Latin or some other, now pretty much dead language? What actually counts as speaking in tongues? I don't understand. With me saying Rof e Hwetkiana count as speaking in tongues? Another very chunky theory demonic N actually stemmed from Enochian, which to some people they would know as angelic language or the language of the angels. And I know that sounds a bit silly, just why would demons use an angelic language? There are real-world examples of things that are similar to this. The Japanese language, the written characters of the Japanese language, originally being borrowed from Chinese, for example. And the big chunky theory is, you might realise that in the Goetic hierarchy, there is 72 demons. You may have also heard of the tale of the fall of the 72 angels. Making sense? Basically, as the old tale goes, whether you believe it or not, as we may or may not know, Lucifer started the whole sort of rebellion in heaven thing. It was recorded at the time that 72, or roughly 72, other angelic entities happened to agree with him and his rebellion, so they joined his cause. The other angelic forces and the other forces of heaven were not happy with this rebellion. They told the big boss, and basically Lucifer and the other angels that happened to be rebelling with him, and some other angels that they found rebelled later, or earlier, if you believe that Beelzebub was the first angel to fall as well. Basically, they all got kicked out. Depending on which side of the story you believe, Lucifer became Satan, or Lucifer met Satan, and they kind of joined forces in hell. And over time, is Helic a word? Anyway, over time, the hellish presence and the fact that they weren't considered angelic entities and they couldn't really commune with heaven anymore, slowly eroded them over time into the 72 demons of the Ars Goetia. And then the tales of Solomon and, restraining the demons and all that sort of thing. Ars Goetia, who was Solomon, or something like that. Otherwise this video would be way too long. But basically, long story short, the whole thing with Solomon is the legend goes that he wanted to build like a castle or a palace or something like that. But he didn't have that many people to help him out. And basically, one day, this, entity came down and spoke with him. I think it's written that it was Abaddon, but I'm not quite sure. But for argument's sake, let's go with Abaddon. Abaddon came down, turned around and said, oh, well, look, I know you need assistance with this castle or palace or whatever it is, blah, blah, blah. I'll give you this ring. This ring allows you to control some of the demonic forces. And, you can call upon us and we'll see if we can help you out with certain things. And, in exchange for certain rules and regulations. And then Solomon decided to trap some of the demons in the Vessel of Brass to take with him places. Some of them built the palace and whatever. And basically that's the long story short. But, yeah. If the Vessel of Brass sounds familiar, it's because sometimes the 72 demons are also known as the 72 Jinn, or the 72 genies. And the Vessel of Brass is essentially what became modernized as the magic lamp. Genies were also associated with living in pots and jars, so I'm not really entirely sure how and when that became modernized, but, just something interesting. It was also theorized around that time that, despite recording the 72 demons in his book, in his records, whatever you wish to call them, one of the first demonic entities that he met with, well, demonic very loosely, but one of the first demonic entities he met up with, besides Abaddon and recording the 72, it's theorized that one of the first he met was actually Beelzebub. He was wandering the desert, Solomon was wandering the desert for water or supplies or whatever it happened to have been, and he came across him. He wasn't necessarily, depicted as Lord of the Flies or sort of like a flyish form. He still had a somewhat angelic form, albeit kind of like corrupted angelic form, because, cast out of heaven and all that. He asked who he was, and he basically replied that he was Beelzebub, and that he was one of the first to fall, and that he was very lonely. Like, someone related to Solomon, I can't necessarily remember exactly, but someone decided to take him in. And it turned out that Beelzebub was rather annoying because he constantly asked what people were doing and up for attention, and basically he constantly pestered people because he was very lonely. He wanted some friends. They likened him to a pest, and the pest that they likened him to was a fly because he would constantly annoy you and he wouldn't leave. So they thought of him as a fly, therefore he was cursed with the form of a fly, and that's theoretically where the whole Beelzebub, being related to Lord of the Flies and all that, stemmed from. Yeah, it turns out the demonic actually also have quite a lot of angelic lore and history around them as well, which makes sense for the big chunk of theory that demonic language stemmed from angelic language. It makes a lot of sense if you read into those theories. But the problem is, unless we ask the demonic ourselves, or somehow ask one of the people that recorded some of the ends, bear in mind that not all of the language has been recorded, only parts of the language have been recorded. We don't know all of it. But yeah, unless we get into contact with someone who happened to write some of the ends down, or the demonic themselves to ask them, we may never know where the language comes from, unfortunately. So on that terrible disappointment, I'm going to end this here.